actually really perfect timing. Uh, and was that off your soundboard there just now?
I wish I could just do that myself. I need to make a soundboard.
Welcome everyone. We're doing a podcast Discord discussion on the auction period that we just had. Joined by a few people. Looks like we got Lewis, Joey, Jake, and Andy, who are all here. And watching as a voyeur is Matt from North Carolina. So if he ever pops in as a unfamiliar voice throughout this, it's Matt, at least for right now. We're going to just talk about how things went. We're going to see kind of what strategies, what trends did people see, and then at the end we'll release this year's first version of the Martin metric. It's going to be So we'll do that for the first time, and then we'll talk about scheduling at the end because that's the next big thing. So.
It's gonna get annoying real quick.
It's gonna be a long one, yeah.
Yeah, this is gonna be a long one. So let's start off with very broad feelings. How did everyone think the auction went from a group standpoint? Thought it went well. Thought we did well. Thought things went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, everything went smoothly.
I think so. I think we had, at least on Brian and my end from the back, we really only had two teams that. There were a couple of teams early that we were like, maybe, but then everybody showed up except for two teams, which out of 100 to have 98 that were actually like there for the most part. I think that's definitely way better than where we were at last year. So that was a step in the right direction. That was actually great.
Oh, and Ethan joined us. This will be some good SEC banter, I feel. Yeah, we definitely only had two, and they were both in the same conference. We had a few people that showed up late, or I think there were a few that either weren't familiar with the format too greatly, or were just really conservative with money, which gave me a little hesitation and pause. But otherwise, most everyone was there. I think everyone was bidding for the most part.
Before we go any further, are you recording?
I am recording.
And you've included your audio.
And my audio should be there, yes.
Okay. We've done this too many times at this point that I just have to double check before we get too invested.
Yeah, I understand. I tested it while we were pre-doing this. I was testing recording for a few times to make sure it was there and working as I intended. So thanks for the check, Lou. I know Michael and Ricky will appreciate that, keeping me honest. And Joey would be devastated to give all this effort and then have it not be recorded and able to put this video on his IMDb credits. Okay, so with that, let's start with the probably the newest change to this year's format was the Devi. So this year, Devi was 2 rounds of potential players. There was potentially more rebate money available. It's also the second year people kind of got familiar with the rebate format and how that kind of worked. From an application standpoint on my end, I think we got almost everything there on time. I think there was one instance I had to stay up till like 2 a.m. on Saturday to make sure one rebate was like ready to go because the guy really wanted to bid on someone and the clock was tight. So
you did that for somebody else, but not for Robbie, for Arkansas? That's nice.
I didn't know he was looking for it. I didn't have my phone on me while I was having dinner, and
he also had the ability to tag me and didn't do that because I was rebating a couple. I rebated myself. I asked Brian. I was like, "Hey, I need to reset somebody. I have about like a 13-minute window." And so I was doing that too. So, yeah, that's for Arkansas. I mean, it's probably for the better. I don't know where he ended up in the Martin metrics, but I'm sure it's much higher because he didn't get whatever player he was going after.
It was important to sometimes save people from themselves, and I think in this case it was the right call. He wanted to spend extra money, I think, on Jaden Reed.
Yeah, so we saved him.
Yeah. So how about everyone else? How do you think the Devi portion went? Did it seem to add more chaos to things? Did it seem to allow you to get more players? Kind of interested. Andy, I know I'll kick it to you because you're one of the most prominent detractors of the expansion of it.
Sure. So I think from my perspective, with respect to the Devi changes, it made me pay attention to it less. So I know like last year during the auction, I was like obsessively tracking who's getting the rebate, who's not on track to get the rebate. This time there were just so many that I was just like made a conscious choice to just forget about it. Like just I'm gonna get my one rebate that I have available to me, and then the rest of the chips are gonna fall where they may. Whereas before I was like, obsessively being like, oh, this person, it's copy two, they have a rebate, they have to get this. I'm gonna bump them up, make them spend more, that sort of thing. So, um, from that perspective, I think my concept of saying forget it was more there was just too much to track for me, the individual. Obviously, I'm speaking to Brian and Lewis here, who are tracking the entire league, so it probably falls on deaf ears a little bit. But for me, the individual experiencing this, it was, I guess, overwhelming. Is that the word we're going with?
That's a good word.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was easier out of the gate because they were all auto nominated, so you can assume that that's somebody's debut pick. I think I ran into that a couple of times where I was like, until Brian posted the rebate in the Discord, where I was like, oh shit, if I'd have known that, Marshall had the rebate on Mims, I'd have jacked him up a little bit. But out the gate, I think it was something I was watching, and you can see like I drove, and it was something that maybe like strategy wise, like people need to maybe rethink, because we had a copy of Cedric Tillman go for $40 because I was jacking him up and somebody else, but it was like that where some like the mindset of, oh, I get a $20 rebate if he goes for $20, like I'm okay paying 40, getting the 20 off, and his price being 20 because everybody else is gonna pay 20. So I saw that a lot more this year than we did last year, where guys that were getting that discount necessarily weren't getting a great price. Now this happened on like high end players like CJ Stroud. I think we were getting great prices on him for the guys that had the rebates. But like some of those mid tier players, seems like they were paying more to get just the $20 rebate for a player, where it should have just been a, hey, let that guy go. So I noticed that a lot with the Devi, but then the other, I don't know if it's a problem, but the other thing that we'll probably see moving forward, and everybody should make note, would be the second copy of most players is just going to cost more money. I think that that's either a side effect, in a positive or negative manner from having the amount of Devi that we now have. People are going to get, in most instances where people do this right, they're going to get an extra $40 towards the back end of the auction, and they're going to spend that causing those second copies to go up. So I think that across the board, we're going to see increased pricing on second copies in most cases.
That's a really interesting thought, because I still think what I was witnessing was a lot of people just went and got their Devi's the first copy. Didn't see a lot of people waiting to get their copy of their Devi rebate on the second one. It seemed like most people who got the best deals got their first copy out of the way, and it was like the quarterbacks almost were the best deals. Like there were a lot of Bryce Youngs and Strouds and a few Richards. Nah, I don't think anyone. There's only two rebates of Richardson. It was you and Indiana, who had Richardson, that I think actually got him. But there were like some, I think, what was it? Ohio got like a $60 Bryce Young after its rebate was applied. I think West Virginia got like a $69 Bryce Young for after its rebate was applied. So it'll be interesting to see if that corrects at all, but it definitely seemed to be like people still put a lot of effort to get that first copy, and which is still interesting.
Yeah, I think in the ACC at least, we just kind of let the people get their first copies, so the second copies just got jacked up. Like I think Gibbs went for like 108 or something like that. With the rebate, it was like 80 something. With Matt UNC got it, and we just kind of let that go. I think the only second copy that was less was Bijan by like $5, but I don't even think Duke got either copy. So
No, Duke didn't. And that's
yeah,
that's an interesting one. I don't know if people like change the way they do the 101 or like the early Devi picks moving forward, because I saw it felt like the people that paid a lot for Bijan and had a rebate, some of them made it out okay, but a lot of people felt like it almost wasn't worth it. It was getting to borderline not worth it to spend that much money, and even a $20 rebate wasn't really going to make too much sense because you were just tying up so much money and so many players were coming off the board. Like the fight for Bijan in the ECC was just borderline ridiculous for that first copy. How many times those three teams just kept resetting each other, and he just sat, and everyone had to keep that money available in order to even have any chance at spending. And so all these other people were able to get players at much cheaper rates.
yeah. It seems like the top end guys are. It's almost not worth it for the $20.
It very well might be like if there's another Bijan type value.
Maybe Caleb Williams next year.
Yeah, and it might just either you do it and you just keep the rebate from someone else from getting that $20, and you just say I'm not gonna get them, and then you just let that kind of happen, or almost don't even pick them. To me, I had a Bijan copy, and some of that stuff was tying it up. The money's so high, and it was taking so long to get a player like that off the board that it felt very hard, because if you missed out on it, then you're kind of left with a what the fuck am I going to do with all this money kind of thing, because there's far less talent available at that point.
Well, it also, I mean, I think part of it gets to, I mean, Brian, we were talking behind the scenes in one of the little group chats that we have, but like out the gate, I mean, you identified, hey, this is, I think Bijan's going to be at 160. I'm putting him at 160 now. He went a little higher than that, I think, for you maybe.
Yeah, the first time, yeah, definitely.
But like getting that appropriate target price for where these guys are going to go, I think that's so helpful in this scenario. But then also having the ability to like be able to pivot, because like teams just weren't pivoting. Like we saw that in the big, what am I in, Big 12?
Mm-hmm.
Like Houston, I think it was Houston, Cincinnati maybe, and Army, or it was Houston and Army, and so Army came late, and somebody else was, it was Iowa State. Iowa State came late, so it was Houston, Iowa State, and Army were just kind of late to the party, and then somehow Kansas got involved, and it was just like they wouldn't let that first copy of Bijan go, and then he came off the board. The second copy I got was like super cheap, because it's almost like they forgot there was a second copy, and just like panic mode set in, and they just started throwing money elsewhere. And I don't know what happened. Army disappeared for a little bit and then came back at the end of the auction. I'm not really quite sure what happened, but it's just like that ability to pivot, to be like, okay, like at some point doing these little resets every couple hours isn't the right strategy, because like you said, you're missing out on all these players. We had a ton of teams. I mean, Army, Houston, I want to say there was one other thing, maybe Kansas State. I can't remember, in the Big 12, just alone in that one auction, that were like letting other players come off the board at better price points because they got so like infatuated with a couple guys that were on the board. And it's just like at some point, like you have to pivot.
That happened in the SEC, didn't it? Didn't finish the.
Happened in the ACC, definitely.
But the SEC had Bijan was also infatuated, and I think at one point Alabama. So Luigi threw a shit ton of money at the first copy of Bijan at like 175, and I think I'm not necessarily sure why a team like Luigi's felt the need to spend 175 on a Bijan for given the state of his team, but he put it there, and then the second copy came up, and Florida finally entered into the fray, and they hold the rebate, and so they put it, because they had a bunch of money, they put it up at the top, and then them and Alabama went back at it, and eventually Texas A&M came out, had gobs more money than everyone else, and just came in with a bat and blew both of them out. And it ended up trickling down where all of a sudden JSN and Gibbs prices shot through the roof for those second copies because these guys had so much more money they had no place to put it, so they had to dump it on the next like most valuable target. So it's very interesting when that happens. I don't know if you have any thoughts to that, Joey or Ethan, if you're still here, on like how that kind of worked out. Neither of them are. Oh, Joey's still here.
Ethan kind of went after Gibbs. He had the Gibbs copy right away, but that it seemed like a lot of people in the SEC were sitting back, waiting to watch to see what Texas A&M would do, because they had $450. So it was almost like everybody was like, "I don't want to start bidding on a guy, want him, and then lose him to A&M." So if you acted early in our auction, you ended up making out because A&M only grabbed one player the first day or two. I think it was either Quentin Johnson or Addison. I think one of those two. And so everything was delayed, and then everybody had all this money. It's like not only did they have money, there were like 6 or 7 teams with $200, and nobody had gotten any players yet, and that's why our second copies went so high. So it was just strange to see. I think Texas A&M was definitely like the wild card.
I loved I remember your comments so succinctly how you cussed him out for him sitting back. You were like, "Fuck you!" You're holding all this money,
because
and we're all paralyzed.
Yeah, everybody was like, "All right, fine, like just come over the top now." Like, because usually that's what everybody, like a lot of people will do. I think you've done this before, Brian. Well, they'll like wait, 10 hours into the first day, see what everything is, and then he was the guy with $452. Like he could have grabbed 3 studs right off the board for less than he paid, for his Bijan copy. You think he paid like $192, and there were guys like, JSN. I got JSN cheap. There were studs to be had at good prices that he kind of, I think he fumbled the bag. So.
Yeah, we'll get to more of the intricate things, but I want to finish up any Devi-related things before moving on to the actual auction part, the details of it. I think for Minor, they're still figuring out what to do with a lot of their rebates on how to use them effectively.
They're still figuring out how to do the auction
that's
as
true.
a whole.
Because some of these players, like valuable players, had really cheap rebates. Like they had an Addison for $50 after a rebate, Bryce Young for $60, and it feels like, JSN went for $50 over there for their first copy, and it felt like, man, it kind of like is leaving a lot to be desired in how to actually function with that piece. So, any other lasting thoughts on the Devi piece and how that played into things? Otherwise, we'll just kind of transition into actual results of the auction. See what
I've got a quick thought.
Go ahead.
Sorry to speak over. I know that was kind of like a free-for-all, and 3 of us jumped on it. But yeah, so I think to me, after doing this for 2 years now, of having a Devi pick with a rebate potential, that sort of thing, I think this is going to affect how I approach the actual Devi draft going forward. This year, unlike last year, I had like a high value Devi rebate, and I felt beholden to making sure I cashed that in, because otherwise you're leaving money on the table. And so that felt like I kind of hamstrung myself for the entire auction, where it's like, all right, half of my budget that I've left for rookies, or more than that, is tied up in a single player now, so I have to figure out around that. So I think going into the actual Devi draft in week 4, I may be considering trying to shoot for a more mid-tier player, just to give me more freedom while still being able to maximize my rebate.
I will say the one that seems to be like the safest bet position-wise to get like the value out of it is almost if you get a tight end. If you pick a tight end, you seem like you're going to get that rebate on that tight end and almost have a free player. Or you like, if someone had picked like Michael Mayer's copies, all were around $20, or you paid $20 at most for them. And it almost feels like the best use of that money in some instances versus like putting it on a really high-end running back that's going to go for a shit ton of money regardless.
Well, it'll be interesting now because, and to piggyback off of Andy and I guess off of you, Brian, because the first year I did whatever tight end I took. I don't remember his name.
Jalen Rodemeyer.
Yeah, ended up not panning out, and I used a different strategy. I used a different strategy in the Devy for Western Michigan, which I didn't get to reap the benefits for. But now taking over Baylor, I have the first Devy pick. The interesting aspect that we'll get to see now is this will be the first kind of go through of the Devy where we let people take somebody
Or someone
a
will
year
already
in
be picked
advance.
before.
Right. So like looking at it, like, we talked about some of these guys already. A lot of these divisional or conference Devy drafts are going to have Caleb, what's his face, the quarterback, Williams, Drake May. I think he's available in the Big 12. But then a lot of these teams are going to have like Marvin Harrison Jr. is already drafted or assigned to a team or whatever we want to call that. Travion Williams. We've seen a couple Braylon Allen copies. Who else? I'm trying to think. There might have been some Raheem Sanders out of Arkansas, Quinn Ewers. We've just seen a couple. Xavier Worthy's, I know his name. Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how teams navigate that process, as well as kind of evaluating the things that Andy and Brian has touched on in terms of what's the best bang for the $20. Because now not only are you going to miss that top guy, you have to you're going to be, okay, is this a position of need, or do we go after a position that's going to demand that price point? It'll be interesting.
Can I ask you this question? Because you and Matt debated this a lot. Do you still think it's valuable to take that top-end guy, or is it better to pick someone that is going to declare early at this point and have that kind of using that total $40 versus potentially only getting 20 or even nothing in an auction?
Matt?
Yeah, your nemesis.
The opposite of whatever he says. That's kind of my strategy in life. I would assume that I was on the.
You were on the one of keeping the talent, so picking someone that's more valuable for the future year, even with a lesser rebate amount. And Matt was staunchly picking someone so you could continue to maximize that 40.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It depends on the team. Like if I was doing this as a team in minor, I'd probably want the better player, or because there's too many intricacies in minor that I tried the Jalen Windermere thing. Like it worked, yes, because I got somebody stuck with a Windermere copy, but I also was downplaying the importance of the Devy rebate when I made that pick. Now as we're into year 2 of this, I think, and with the adding of the Devy rounds, that draft is more important. The strategy that you take into that, and I probably have switched just in terms of I think it's more valuable to have the full $20 and get the potential of having $40 back, because we saw a lot of I'll use Big 12 for example because I was in there. Marshall spent a ton of money on the upperclassmen and didn't have a whole lot left for the rookies. Out the gate, I don't know what the hell he was doing. Then he kind of put his thinking cap on straight, and he got Will Levis, used the $20 rebate, got that, and then the extra $20 there helped him get Marvin Mims, and then the extra $20 from there helped him get another player. And so I would say you just go for that route moving forward, because again, even though Will Levis wasn't the top quarterback, he's still valuable. He was in that right price range that I think Brian hit on earlier, where it's like, hey, try to find maybe a player that everybody's not enthusiastically trying to acquire, and I think that is what happened with Marshall in both cases. With Marvin Mims, he was kind of at the top of that like 3-star recruit section, and then Will Levis obviously the next best quarterback outside of the top 3 there. So I think that's probably the strategy that most people should look at.
Well, I kind of think the opposite. So I think it depends on your situation. If you're like you do these in week 4, so you kind of know where you're going to be at for the year. So if you're gonna be picking last in the first round next year, you could pick up someone now and keep him from being taken. So like I took Henderson. I think he was supposed to be good. I don't know how good he is right now, but took him in the end of like the second round because I knew I'm kind of going for it right now. Next year I won't be picking in the top of the first round, so I'll never have a chance of getting him anyway. So I might as well get him in the second round, get $5 off, or is that 15? Is it $5 less?
Yeah, it's 25% off. So $5 is always what's coming off.
Yeah, so I'll have him for 15 rebate instead of having 0 rebate on him because I'll be picking at the end of this first round this year. And I could just grab someone else and I just won't have the second round pick this year, but I'll have 2 players with the rebate. Hopefully.
Man, so that really this rule change with the carryover Devi picks, like this actually makes this more of a Devi league.
Correct.
I'm more of a fan of getting rid of the second round though. I'd like to go back to just one round.
That's a different conversation.
I think it's stupid to have 2 rounds of Devies. Just kind of shooting the shit, you know. You don't know what you're doing. It's a crapshoot. Even if you know college really well, you don't know.
I do.
Well, maybe you don't.
I don't know anything about college football.
And who's to blame for that, Matthew?
I mean, I guess I should just pick Alabama players. I won't go wrong.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of. It seems like there's a lot of unfamiliarity, and I'm not sure how many people have picked up on this, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, because then the people who are engaged can make this an advantage to them in paying attention and taking the effort to figure stuff out. But in the same vein, we've had a lot of questions on auto picks and issues with people not picking and how much of an advantage is that, and trying to weigh what's the right balance of it all. So I'm sure there'll be more conversations on how this all plays out to strike that right balance, right?
So. We definitely haven't beat to death the auto pick conversation yet, so I think more of that would be necessary.
Not here, no.
Don't get me started. I won't stop.
We're not doing it here. But
okay, sorry, I'm joining late. My bad. Apologies.
So we will we'll move on. All right, results themselves. So for people who are unfamiliar, we did this fun exercise. We grade recruiting classes based on a set formula on how a recruit plays out. We use things like startup ADP from Superflex leagues to help assess values of a player, and then we assign star rankings based on that set value, and those values kind of stack up on scores. So all recruiting classes are based on your top 8 players. Any players after your top 8 don't really count to your score. They are counted for in the tables, but there aren't really provided any points. And only your top 4 recruits get the full points, and after that you get less. So that's kind of set the scene to just make sure people understand, I got 20 players, but I'm only ranked the 50th class. Well, that's because you only weigh everything at the top 8. That way everyone can kind of be measured on some sort of normalized scale versus essentially being a volume-based class. So the big caveat that happened this year was we had a lot more transfer activity, which led to some teams having gross budgets over other teams, and the primary culprits were Texas A&M and Virginia. I don't know if Joey, you want to get back on that soapbox and kind of express either your interpretation
Right.
of that strategy or thoughts in general on how that works.
Sure, and you can interrupt me as I go on, but so you see and I see Texas A&M as number one recruiting class, right?
Mm-hmm.
So based on the criteria that you set, sure, fine, he got some great players, but at the same time, he also lost Najee Harris, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, Drake London with 3 years, George Pickens with 3 years, Amon-Ra St. Brown with 3 years, Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, he had a great class, but for what he gave up, I don't think it was good enough. So, like, adjusted for all the drops that were made, I don't think he had the best draft. He may have the best class of freshmen in the league, but I don't know. That doesn't win you a championship.
Yeah,
he ain't winning a championship this year. We all know that.
No, he's not going to. It was a weird. Michael's in a couple leagues with us, and it was one of those things. As soon as he did it, I forgot Michael was here from the rip. To be honest, I thought he was taking over an orphan, and that was his clean kind of start. Which is why I was like, okay. I mean, if Michael wants to tear it down and rebuild it so he has his footprint on it, that's fine. But then I remembered that he's been here and that this was his team. I agree with Joey. I don't understand the teardown. Like, he basically tore down something that was pretty good in hopes that he can build something that's pretty good. I don't think you can beat some of the pieces that he dropped, like, the Drake Londons and the Amon-Ra and Pickens. To do kind of what he did. Now, I think he could have gotten away if he'd stopped after he, got to those guys that maybe were a year or two eligibility, but left the Pickens, Amon-Ra, and the other stuff and build a team around that. I think he'd be in better shape. But I actually, this is like one of the far and few in between that I actually like agree with Joey on his take or his interpretation of what he witnessed. I mean, it was insane. I'm not really quite sure.
Well, how about we use the contrast of this? So I think Virginia made out like bandits based on their transfer class. They only put out Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Devonta Smith were the big ones, Jake. And he made out like a fucking bandit on those three to just kind of reset.
He made so much money off those three.
And he just reset his eligibility clock, really. Instead of having
Yeah.
juniors and sophomores, and he's now got 3 freshmen, which I thought
he did a decent job. I don't know. I liked that. Yeah, I mean, Devonta Smith went for over $100.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't believe that. Like that. I mean, he made so much money off the transfer portal. He put Clemson out of the running for any meaningful recruits. But I think he did a good job. I just don't know. I don't know what happened last year. He took over 2 years ago, or did he have this team last year?
He took over the team last year. I think he might have.
Brees Hall wasn't redshirted at all. So
he played him.
Was he good last year? I don't even.
Yeah, he had 5 weeks of being good, and then tore his ACL, and then.
I'm saying his team.
Oh yeah, I think Virginia was good last year until everything fell apart.
So yeah, I guess that makes more sense. But I would have redshirted him either way. I think he's good. I don't know. He has 2 years and he'll be fine. He'll probably redshirt. What's his name? Bijan and everybody he got. Hopefully, he just needs to get a quarterback.
He should. Bryce Young.
Oh, yeah, he's got Bryce Young. Damn.
Yeah,
so yeah, he's gonna be good.
He should redshirt. I mean, I'm assuming that's the strategy here.
Redshirt everybody.
Redshirt everybody that he just got, and then obviously rolling into Bryce Hall's junior year, he'd have some pretty good guys. So my guess is the step next year would be to try to fill out the rest of the starting lineup.
The only thing I have issue with both of and I'll throw Lewis into this too because you were
No, F you.
You were the other like start from scratch that did pretty well or got a lot of talent on the team.
Right, but I don't think I did it necessarily. Like I didn't do like, and this is the one thing before then I'll let Brian go. But like Baylor really only had like 2 players that were worth anything, and I cut them both. It's not like I like.
You had no other choices.
Right, there was no choice there on like Baylor. Even if I kept those 2 players, like, but the team wouldn't have been any better or worse. Like it was really bad. Like these guys, I think, could have gone into the auction without making any drops and tried to build a competitive team. Like I think they just kind of took this upon themselves. Like I want to do this rebuild, not like I have to rebuild. Like Baylor is an I have to rebuild.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
But the only thing I point against what UVA's strategy is and Texas A&M's strategy is the Bijan piece. To me, if I'm doing a teardown or I'm starting from the very bottom, and I think you would agree with this, Lewis, if the value didn't just fall into your lap, or I think even Matthew, who's Charlotte, would agree with this approach, is I wouldn't have spent that money on Bijan, the $200, the $180 on a team that needs everything now, right?
Yeah, he should have gotten more. He should have gotten the big 3 wide receivers, and then had that quarterback.
I would have focused on getting at least
That's the
one
only thing I wouldn't
quarterback
like.
and then the wide receivers to just because those players take time to get that value. I think like a player like Bijan is usually like the final piece that you push for. And
Yeah, and he's going to be playing right away. You never know with the running backs too. They could. I mean, Bijan's supposed to be a generational talent, whatever. But so is Todd Gurley. I don't know if he flamed out in the 5th year or something like that. But he's got to be careful with those guys.
I think it's interesting that all 3 of us are sitting at the top of the rankings. All 3 of us have Bijan. I said all along that Bijan was not my target. I think, again, he was their target. Bijan just kind of fell to me because Big 12 was sleeping, and I just kind of made a decision. But I was going into it with the idea similar to probably what Matt of Charlotte did. And really anybody that's trying to build a team in this league would be you want to get those 3 or 4 wide receivers maybe, and so like my targets were Flowers, Downs, maybe a Mims, like the guys that were in that category, similar to what Joey's haul was. I don't know exactly off the top of my head which players Joey got, but when Joey posted his whether it was at the end of day 1 or the beginning of day 2, where he posted his class. I'm going to pull up his team real quick. Where he had like Flowers, Reed, Rasheed Rice, Jackson Smith, Najigba. Like that's what I wanted to do. Because just like what Brian said, I think that like a Brees Hall or a Bijan Robinson, like those are guys that you can then identify, like you can plug and play those guys. I think Jake said something about, wouldn't you redshirt Brees Hall anyway? I'd redshirt him anyways. The running backs, just because of things like you said, like, Todd Gurley burn out after year 5 or whatever it is. The running backs, if they're playing, you plug and play them. Like, to wait on a redshirt for a running back is just kind of ridiculous because you can plug and play the next guy. Yes, is he, is Bijan generational or whatever in terms of talent, prospect-wise? Yes, but, like, you have a Kenneth Walker blow up, you play him, and then not have to worry about it because look what comes the next year after Kenneth Walker, a Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, the running backs, the production there, you can at least have a better time finding. Wide receivers are so, like, hard. You have to get the guy in the right system with the right quarterback. He has to pan out. Like, there's a lot that has to happen for the wide receivers, where you can definitely just plug and play running back. So I would have preferred to go, get depth at wide receiver, but Bijan just, at the price one I got, I couldn't pass on him.
Yeah, I mean, you got him, what?
Hey, what'd you get?
Bijan at 132. I got the third cheapest copy in the entire league. So, and at that point, I think Jackson Smith Najigba was
He was 136 or something
He,
like that.
yeah,
already.
he went higher. Like, and so I was just like, I'm not going after that. Um,
And I think
and
Gibbs went that high for you
yeah,
guys over too.
Gibbs was like 128 or something like that. So I was like, for the $4 extra, I'm taking Bijan. And I'll just figure it out. Obviously, I'm redshirting him. And I think a lot, so is Texas A&M and Virginia. I'm not sure where the other Bijan copies fell. Virginia Tech, Ohio State. I would assume that some of these guys are getting played, so I'm hoping that there's like an advantage there with the fifth year, because eventually like that's kind of how you get a leg up, right? So it was like in NCFF I had Christian McCaffrey because redshirted him, medical redshirted him, and you have him 6 years into the league, and that's like a massive boost in terms of what everybody else has. So I think that's my kind of route with Bijan, but that was not planned. That just kind of fell there. And I still think that I was able to put together some better pieces because of that price.
I mean,
Because I think
you also got a Richardson that was.
I was like nine of my. Even though you're only counting the first 8, I said I got 9 of my guys are 3 stars or more, which is technically better haul than what A&M and Virginia did with more money.
Definitely.
So I think I
So
kind
you're
of got
essentially
better.
first place.
No, I just think that I was still able to pull, like, even though I don't love the wide receiver depth that I got, I think I got some nice, like Josh Downs. I think is a nice piece, especially with the fact that I have Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I like your haul better than I like
Cedric
UVA's.
Tillman. I think again for this year probably not a whole lot, but like Amari Cooper's contract's up. It's one of the other guys, Donovan Peoples-Jones' contract's up. So like Tillman has a chance next year to be potentially wide receiver 1, if not wide receiver 2 in Cleveland. So I just kind of went about it trying to target guys that way. And so if I can pull out of this with two wide receivers instead of the 4 that I was going with, then I think that you'll see a auction haul pretty similar to what Joey got this year would be my target next year.
So let's stick with, because you passed it to Joey. Joey, anything else from the SEC that's worth noting? We did have, if Robbie's here, right, still? Robbie, we brought it up earlier, but I want to make sure we get to discuss the drama that happened with the not only the Will Levis copy, but also the drama of the Jaden Reed inability to get you the rebate. I don't know if you want to get out all of your anxiety and issues with that now to really satiate our drama that we need out of this podcast. And Joey, you can comment too. Feel free.
I'm guessing Robbie's not here, huh?
He's muted, so I don't know if he's going to hop back on or if he's putting his kids to bed.
Robbie, I could have punched him in the face for you if you asked.
I also could have given you your rebate if you had asked.
Yeah, my memory's kind of shot. So
the only other thing that
more
was
than I do, Brian.
super notable from SEC in my perspective was Missouri completely misunderstood the assignment and got 2 quarterbacks, which they do need quarterbacks, but thought they were going to be super sneaky and hold on to
my God,
a Richardson and the hopes of transferring them next year and make a bunch of money. And I had to break the news to them that no, you only get 50% back, and it instantly deflated them and what they thought they were going to be able to do. So that's just a worthwhile reminder. That strategy doesn't really work. It's usually when you need to do transferring, you're never going to really make more on a player unless you paid really little.
Right.
From one year to the next.
Jeez Louise. Yeah, I mean, it's probably a strategy. I would assume you transfer Pickett, not Richardson or Young. I think you have to keep those guys.
Yeah, at this point, for sure.
at this point, and then it's probably something maybe 3 years from now that once the dust is settled, you transfer whichever one you don't use. But I don't foresee you transferring either one of those. Good lord.
Yeah, that strategy sounds like locking into a 2-year rebuild, like a 2-year teardown, not just a 2-year rebuild, a 2-year teardown.
I'm glad that you said that it was the rebate strategy he was going for. I was like, if this gentleman thought it was going to be super flex, like I'd have cried, because that's just terrible when he has a ton of quarterbacks already on the roster.
Yeah.
But I mean, listen, like it could be like there were teams that came out of this thing with like worse. I don't know where he is in the ranks. It's probably not good.
Where she is in the rankings.
Oh, okay, whoever. Where are they at in the rankings? 100. I don't even. Not 81. That's what I mean. So like, still do better than 20 other people with that kind of mess up. I don't think it's like the worst thing that could have happened. But it's definitely not like it's definitely not something you want to plan for.
For sure. I still think they ended up with two really good assets that they can build a team around for sure. But that the way that it originally was transpiring just definitely didn't make sense. SEC also.
Brian, I think we should mention Ole Miss. So Ole Miss basically took over all the Texas A&M transfers.
That's true, which was smart. That team was in a contending mode. They spent a lot of money on players. I forgot that they got Ayuk. Did they get Higgins?
They got Ayuk. They got Higgins. They got Drake London. So it was an absolute reload. And they got Najee too.
Oh yeah. So they walked into this with like just a couple like $20 or something like that, and I'm sure they're happy with that. They're a first year team, so they'll be competing on this right away. And they still picked up Tyjae Spears and Dalton Kincaid. I don't know how.
I think he got Jordan Love too. Did he get? I think. Oh no, he had Jordan Love. I'm not sure. But he's got Hurts. He'll be a top.
Yeah, the West is garbage too. So he'll be walking pretty easily. I think his only competition is probably going to be Brahmy in Mississippi State, and maybe Robbie with Arkansas in that. So
I don't know, but Robbie didn't get his rebate, so
he
probably not as big as a threat as you would have been had he gotten that in time.
Jaden Reed's the missing piece, and we will hear about that from the end of days. Joey, did you want to make any comments about your rival Tennessee in terms of their haul? They are the second best SEC recruiting class.
Did he really?
Yeah, and Vandy's all the way down at 8.
I guess if Gibbs pans out for him, then all the best. I got Rashee Rice. He got Rashee Rice. I don't. Who else did he really get though? I don't see any.
The computer likes Kincaid and Hendon Hooker, and that's really why he's that high. But
that's why he's that high.
I don't know. I mean, the Chase Brown piece isn't bad, or Rashee Rice. I mean, Joey got Rashee. That's the other Rashee Rice piece. And I think a lot of people like him. So I don't know. I don't think it's that good of. That's what I pulled it up and I was like, there's no way. Like, I don't know where Joey sits in the ranks, but I liked what Joey got better than kind of this haul. I really like what Joey did. Joey did great.
Wow, this is like the end of times here. Thank you, Russ.
All right. We've talked a little bit about SEC. We've talked a little bit about ACC. We talked a little about Big 12. Andy, you want to talk about Big 10 a bit? You and I were in that. I thought Big 10 again is like super serious. I don't know about you, but I feel like we're all serious on that. I think everyone seems to do their homework and takes this very seriously, and the pricing is all regimented and nothing's really out of the ordinary in terms of what went where. We probably could have spent a little more on QBs, but I think for overall we were all very consistent and very precise on what we wanted to spend for players.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with that. It's also tough because our our channel, like our Big Ten channel, is just like dead, so you can't get a read on most people.
Yeah,
Um,
serious.
But yeah, there are a couple things in the Big Ten. One thing that you noted to me earlier was that Big Ten was just really gun shy when it came to transfers. There weren't a ton of high profile transfers put out into the world, and then there wasn't a ton of spending on the transfers coming in. So any transfers that happened were very minor as far as how it affected the landscape of the spending available for the rookie portion. And then the other thing, I'm gonna breeze past that. We can always go back to that if you have more to say about that. But the other thing was that yeah, the Big Ten auction felt like it was kind of broken up into like 3 phases, which were like day 1, day 2, day 3 plus, effectively. So like day 1 was where it felt like some people forgot there was a second copy and prices were going nuts, and it was like very stressful in that way. Day 2 felt like that's where all the value was. Like if you lock in your top price on day 2 and get it either that day or overnight, like you probably got a value there. I'm chalking that up to it being Saturday and people have shit to do. And then day 3 and on was where it was like, all right, there are 4 or 5 schools that still have an ass load of money and they need to spend it. And so they were just all fighting for what was left. Big things there were want to call out Notre Dame and Michigan State here. So Ricky with Notre Dame, shout out Ricky. He had a whole bunch of money that he accumulated, got scared of the day 1 prices, and then had to kind of overpay to get some names that were remaining on the board on day 3, which he did a good job of. And once the money is kind of irrelevant as to what you're actually paying, then that's fine. But and then Michigan State was the other one I wanted to bring up. He had a ton of money and then did not show up until it was like too late. So he had a ton of money, couldn't really find out how to spend it, and then ended up just like pricing out everything that was left. But he was doing that on scraps at that point.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with Shane's approach. He was one I was worried about out of the Big Ten. Him and Indiana showing up, because he spent a little on the first day, spent a little on the second day, like bids, didn't really get anyone, and then I was like, he would just go silent the entire day. So I try to check in on him and make sure he was okay. And he's like, yeah, I'm just kind of feeling my way through this, and I was like, okay, but just know, like, eventually you're gonna have to get something, or you're gonna be spending it on like nothing. And
Players are gone; they're gone.
Brian's like, please bid against Andy.
well, no, what Andy got, I had no problem with it with Andy, and I was already spent my money because I just went all in on Bijan. That was my whole goal for this auction.
Yeah, we had different goals this year.
But like, I more so was thinking it from the commissioner standpoint. Like, I don't want you to have a bad team, get frustrated, and then like leave, kind of thing. I want you to feel like you're building your own team, and he seemed confident that what he was doing was what he wanted to do. So I just kind of let off the gas, and let him do what he needed to. I really loved what Ricky was doing for a guy who transferred his players out during it. He got rid of Hurts and Ramondre Stevenson. I thought he started like setting the new foundation really well with 2 quarterbacks and then a bunch of pretty good wide receivers that he can just build off of moving forward.
I agree. I think he probably just regrets not spending a little earlier, just because by the time he had all these riches and the players coming off the board were no longer the guys you want to like go into a season confident that your future cornerstones, that sort of thing. But I think the Bryce Young, even Bryce Young for $64, that's got to be the cheapest one, right?
Yeah.
That was an insane value.
And he didn't have a rebate either, so that was even
right.
More
yeah,
impressive.
But it was like the rest of the board, the way it shook out, like we were all, our money was tied up elsewhere, so he could just have it, Will Levis for 35, it's a fine flyer. Downs, Reed, Rice, all fun, interesting day 2 guys. So, my point was that like he had to pay 54 on Downs and Reed, but once you're on day 3 and the players have come off the board already and you have all that money, like you can't take it to the next year with you. So you might as well spend 54 if you got 54, right? So he did what he had to do and was able to salvage it, even though it was a little backloaded. But yeah, I thought he did great with all things considered.
And the other one that transferred a lot was Penn State. This is their second year of doing like a slight rebuild each time. Like they put out Herbert, and I think they also put out another, was it wide receiver? No, we didn't have any wide receivers. But I think they put out Herbert and someone else. I can't remember. But
DeAndre Swift went for a lot, I think. Was that him?
that was a Maryland. Maryland put
was
DeAndre Swift out, and I thought, he made a lot out of that. I think he got his quarterback. But I thought...
Yeah,
again,
English. I put my Swift down there, too.
Yeah, Damian and Jordan of Maryland, I thought just kind of reset their team very well. Getting a quarterback, some wide receivers, some lower-end running backs. Maryland could have probably maybe spent a little bit better. I think his Kendre Miller was the one that was the second copy and got kind of priced up to the moon there, but say Flowers at around 70 wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it's that classic, like, the last copy of the last person at a position in a tier grouping, and that was that Kendre Miller. So that's how that one ended up, like, $61. But
and I also really liked what Iowa did. I thought they got to use their rebate on Will Levis super well, where he got a really cheap one. They got Marvin Mims for really cheap, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba was a bit more, but I think he got at least some really quality talent. So can't really...
Oh, and he got the appropriate player to college team correlation with Sam Laporta. That's huge. I was not able to do that this year, so I'm envious.
Yeah. So I think it went well. I think this is... No one, like, jumped. I think everyone in the Big Ten's kind of in tiers. There's, like, a clear contending group of, like, 3 or 4 teams. There's a clear, like, secondary group of 3 or 4 teams, and then the ones that just started their rebuild last year, like Michigan and stuff like that, they're there. And then there's the ones like Ricky and Penn State and them that are, starting over. Everyone kind of did what they needed to do for their team, I thought, pretty well, all things considered, in the Big Ten. So
I'll trust your analysis there. I was solely concerned about myself.
which is great. I think everyone just took care of themselves and were really fixated on what their team needed. If I was being honest, the teams that needed quarterback went and got quarterbacks. There was teams that needed running backs and were contending, like Ohio State and myself, and they went and got them. I think Nebraska did a really good job for what they needed to do. I don't think anyone was bad. Let me just put it that way. I think everyone just got what they needed out of the Big Ten.
Yeah, it makes our conference a little tough to find an edge.
True. Very true.
Yeah, when you're in a 100-team league and your whole conference is full of sharps, then it's hard to stand out against.
Now, speaking of edges, let's move to the most maybe egregious thing I thought happened in the auction was Pac-12 letting goddamn Air Force walk away with the cheapest Bijan Robinson in the entire auction. I thought that was malpractice of the highest order, that they let the contending team walk away with that much, not having him pay up for that player. I thought was just complete malpractice in the entire conference. Either they weren't paying attention or didn't care, or they're just conceding the entire conference to him right away. I just thought that, in my opinion, made no sense. To just have him go as the cheapest by, like, you compare what Texas A&M spent for Bijan and he almost spent $100 less. Just feels egregious. And I put the most blame on LD Gunn. He deserves the most blame out of anyone. But
damn, Air Force is really good.
Air Force is fucking spectacular of a team. I think they're clear number 1 this year going into the preseason. They even got Jackson Smith and Jigba on top of all the other players that they have on their team. So I think he got what he needed out of this class. He spent everything on those 2 players, and I can't believe they let him have to only spend everything on those 2 players. They didn't even make him, like, he got the best running back and best wide receiver in the class and just then paid pittance for everything else.
Yeah, I mean, and they also let, was it Washington? I think Russ posted his, and Russ pulled Addison, Flowers, and the other Jackson Smith. Yeah, like, you let the contending team get the two of the better pieces. I mean, the top wide receiver and the top running back, and then you let the same team get. Is that the top 3 wide receivers in order?
I think so.
JSN, Flowers,
maybe
Addison.
Quentin Johnson falls in there somewhere, but I think that's
but like okay, so maybe 3 of the top 4. Like, I just don't know like because when I saw Washington, so I was like, what the hell? Like, that's one that I would take, and I was just like, what is going on in the Pac-12? Now I didn't see the Air Force nonsense, but the Pac-12 should be ashamed. I'm not really sure. I know who I'd blame. I know you went after LD, but this falls solely on Jason of Oregon State. I don't know what the fuck he was doing, if he didn't understand the Devi rebate process or any of that stuff, but he probably should have just done better.
Now, is that your unbiased opinion or biased opinion?
Neither. That's just the truth.
Okay, all right. I think he was only wanting Bijan, and everything else is gravy to him. So he got a bunch of other players, spent almost most of his money on Bijan, and then he didn't really have a large budget because his team was not really good that last year, where he didn't get a lot of player awards or players didn't graduate or any of that stuff, and then he had to pay $10 to keep Lamb this offseason. Versus Washington, who is interesting because they teared down their team. Got a bunch of money last year from player awards, graduates, lets Jalen Hurts walk. Lets the Heisman winner from last year walk out the door for some extra money. And then I think put it to good use. I think the only thing that would have made this even better is if he somehow had found a way to snag one of the quarterbacks, even if it was like Will Levis. I think that would have just put his class, in my opinion, that much better. But he spent most of his money on those 3, so it's kind of hard to say otherwise.
Oregon had a good class there.
Yeah, Jesse.
And I bring that up because that's Matt's old team, and when he was at the head of Oregon, they never had that good of a class. No, I'm just kidding. But then, Jesse, we played with Jesse, and he took over. Did he move up, or did he just take this over like cold turkey? Like, he wasn't in the league before, was he?
No, he was. He was Stanford last year, and he wanted to be Oregon, so he took over Oregon.
Oh, all right. So it wasn't a name change. He just took on that team.
Yeah, he took over the entire roster. So
yeah. So I like the haul. I think Chase Brown's going to be underrated. And same thing with Keandre Miller. I think he's got 2 running backs. Like, I don't know. It's an interesting what he does with these. I mean, if it was me, I'm redshirting because I think that these guys have more value as pieces. Like, if Joe Mixon leaves, whatever the hell happens in New Orleans with Kamara, whether it's the legal side of things or his contract, I believe, has an out prior to 2024 season. You have 2 guys that could potentially be RB1s, but it won't happen this year. It would happen next year. But I like those pieces, and then Rashee Rice, obviously we've talked about. I like him. I think some other people do, and even though like Michael Wilson and Deuce Vaughn are just kind of like weird pieces, like they could be like the teams drafted these guys obviously with some sort of goal in mind. I mean, Michael Wilson in Arizona. I mean, if Kyler Murray could ever put down the Call of Duty and pick up a playbook, Michael Wilson could be worthwhile, and then Deuce Vaughn, if Deuce Vaughn like plays that role that Pollard used to play, like it might not be a terrible thing. So I kind of like what Oregon did. And I'm missing CJ Stroud, obviously. He had CJ Stroud to get out in front of losing Joe Burrow next year.
Yeah.
Is Deuce Vaughn Darren Sproles?
Could be.
He's like the same height, but that might
small
be
enough.
I don't know. Is Deuce Vaughn? I'm not actually sure. Is he like a pass catching specialist? I thought he was more of like a Mojo Drew, kind of like wrecking ball up the middle, just tiny. I could be wrong.
I think he's more of a pass catching specialist. I don't think he's like exceptionally thick or
He's like 5'6",
weigh a lot.
175.
Yeah, I don't think he weighs a lot.
He's not
Yeah.
very big. I would
Like I said, I'm the same camp as Jake, that I just don't pay attention to college football at all. So
yeah, I think he would, but again, you
doesn't
have
matter.
Pollard there. I would think that maybe he goes into Pollard's role, but again, Pollard's still there, so I don't think you would need someone to fill Pollard's role. But
right,
I think that he's just somebody there that's going to be a change of pace
It's a 6th
if
round
he
pick,
can get
right?
into the right thing.
Yeah, he's a 6
Yeah.
That'll
So I
be
don't
good.
think he jumps any of those guys, but I think he's one you'll see maybe a similar like career trajectory. I'm not saying he's going to become like the RB1 in Dallas 5 years from now, but somebody that Pollard didn't get a whole lot of time share with his rookie season, so I think you see special teams, maybe some returns, third downs occasionally, and then kind of work his way into like that third down role, like long term. And those guys aren't bad value in a league like this.
yeah,
They add.
be that late season guy, like when people are starting to get injured.
Right. So I kind of like what Jesse did.
Yeah. Some other notables, I'll give a call out to Cal. Cal's a new coach and did really well. I think they ended up getting the third or fourth best class out of grade.
Fourth.
And I think, they did well with the money. They transferred players like Herbert and I think a few others, if I remember. And I think he turned it into at least a start for a team that probably needed a good reset. Which coincidentally, almost all the transfers, and there were a few of them, there was a Jonathan Taylor, there was Justin Herbert, there was a few other players that were transferred, all went to USC, so that's why USC scored, recruiting class was pretty low, and they pretty much just tooled up and kind of like what Ole Miss did, and I don't know if it'll make a difference because he's got to play Air Force, but he at least is the clear number 2 in that division. So let's we didn't talk too much about Minor at all, and I wish we don't have Taylor or any other resident groups, but I paid attention, and Lewis and I had to jump in to take over for 2 teams, Nevada and Utah State.
Brian, we're not looking for a pat on the back.
I know we're not. We're not.
We're just giving necessary background information
we're not
here.
here.
We're not looking for anything extra.
Hey, good work, guys.
But those 2 teams did not show up, so we stepped in to try bidding, and we definitely tried to do our best with what was available on the board. But because those teams weren't there. I don't know if Minor was asleep at the wheel at the start, but there were some real deals to be had if you were aggressive at the start of this auction. Players like Jackson Smith the Jigma going for $70 with a $20 rebate. I think that Bryce Young was at $80 with a $20 rebate. And both their Bijan copies were pretty cheap for a place like Minor where you think they would have to spend a hell of a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, being in Minor, the first kind of go through, I think Minor struggles with where to draw the line on the evaluation of the top tier guys.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, because you're bidding against so many other guys, you have to you're trying to get as many pieces as possible. Like, you can't do something like we mentioned, Missouri. Like, if you end up with 2, like if you end up with like a Richardson and a Stroud or whatever that case was, like in Minor, like, you're screwed for a very long time. So you have to be very, very careful with the pieces you get, because you don't want to go too top. Like, you don't want to go too top heavy to where like you now can't fill out a roster. And so you see them kind of struggle with that, I think. So that's where you see those discounted copies of the better players. And then once they kind of get into a groove, once everybody shows up to bid, and I don't know if it's like, hey, they've got to watch other conferences players come off the board first to help kind of figure out where that price range should be. Once they kind of get into that driver's seat, they're pretty good until you get to kind of one of those situations that I believe it was Andy talking about earlier, where you're down to the last copies of a couple guys. There's not much left on the board. Everybody has money, and then you see like the $50 like
Oh, it got crazy.
whatever play. I mean, some of that stuff was ridiculous. You see a little bit of it in other conferences, but like you kind of see that ebb and flow that Andy was talking about, where it's like day one, you're like they forget what it's not that they forget that there's a second copy. It's like day one they forget what they're doing. Day two they figure it out. Day three is a shit show because there's more teams, which means there's more money and people show up and just kind of like jack things up. Like Fresno State was one that was late to the party, and Fresno State then walked away with like
Not much.
I want to say he got a $20 Deuce Vaughn. I'm trying to think of what else. Xavier Hutchinson, was his copy
Paid
expensive?
71 for Mims, which was clearly the highest.
Yeah, right. So I mean, so you run into those situations in minor a lot more than the other conferences. But yeah, I think it's just that trying not to go. You don't want to overspend out the rip in minor, and it's just like there's that hard kind of like, is this guy worth it? Should I do this? Like, and I think for those in minor that are listening, if you look at Taylor's auction, I mean, Taylor got, I don't even know if it's a top 10 overall, but that's what it ranks as. Top 10
it's
haul
just two
here.
players. So
But it's just two players, right? And it's like Taylor was one that was like, hey, listen, like, I'm just going to add two guys. I'm going to pay what I pay, and then I'll throw whatever else, out there. And so Taylor got Richardson at a pretty good price, if I remember.
Yeah.
And then he was bitching about his Gibbs copy, but again, I don't think it was anything like, it could have been way worse in minor. I mean, 124, it's the fourth most expensive copy, but like again, it's not like terribly far off from where the other teams are. And to turn around and you go, okay, you backfill, and it's not like he even backfill. Like there were teams that we've talked about that were backfilling with like worse talent. Like he backfilled with Dwayne McBride, who may make the roster now that Dalvin Cook's supposed to like cut out of there. Deneric Prince is one that I think got like a hype headline at the wrong time, because then everybody just kind of was like, oh, we're gonna add this guy because he got compared to Nile Davis, and then something about a speed score that was equal to Isaiah Pacheco. So he was one, like, not a bad piece to add in minor. And then I think he was like obsessed with this Andre Ios whatever fucking guy out of whatever Ivy school he came out of.
It's Yosh.
Yeah, whatever. You've got
Lewis. Lewis,
Dude, I don't
why
watch
does
this
Taylor
shit.
have 15 running backs?
I don't know either. I don't think that that's a strategy in this, considering you can only start 3. Most of these teams should be wide receiver heavy, so I don't know what he's doing with all of these. But like the Jake Funk, I don't know where that player came from, but like he should cut that guy. Like Ty Chandler or something. Like some of these guys should be cut in replaced with wide receiver tight end depth.
Especially since he has such top-end guys.
I can't speak on that. I don't know why he's doing
Answer
that.
for Taylor. Why does he?
We need answers.
Yeah.
Well,
I have
Lewis
an-
kind of, anoints himself the minor,
Taylor whisperer.
expert.
Yeah,
so I want to know what he's
I don't
thinking.
think it's. I mean, like I said, it's one of those things. Like I don't carry very many running backs for that reason. I mean, you can only start 3, and I've talked to not recently, but I talked to Brian about like, hey, like for the sake of some of these teams in minor, you might have to bump that restriction because we don't restrict any other position. Like, but it's just one of those things where, as the lineup set, there's zero reason why he should have this many running backs. The dart throws I get, but after they don't land, like, and he added like Joshua Kelly, in this auction. I'm trying to think if he added any of these other guys, but like he had some actually pretty decent running back depth. I'm not sure. I mean, he identified Gibbs. I think he probably could have gone like a JSN, and maybe that fits the roster a little bit better. But again, at the end of the day, I can't speak for Taylor, but I would definitely drop like Sincere McCormick, Jordan Mason. Maybe I'd keep. Muhammad Ibrahim. I don't think's worth stashing. Jake Funk, Ty Chandler. I would drop all those guys and pick up any type of wide receiver. And there's actually, I was surprised by the number of actually upperclassmen that were usable in minor that probably should be rostered that currently aren't.
Minor probably needs to use, and this is something I don't know if they'll ever figure out, because you've alluded to it, that I think they're just kind of like the blind or leading the blind in some of that minor group. You know, like Chuck, Neil, Mike out of New Mexico State, Nathan of Northern Illinois. Like they're guys that are very active in the format, but I don't know if they know exactly fully well what really should happen with minor. They need to be utilizing a lot more of the upperclassmen transfer pieces. There's just like some teams should have cut some seniors. Some teams should know that they're like on the precipice of being good for the 1-2 year window that minor really has, and they should just be like going for it and pushing in and taking advantage of it, whereas they need to be much more tighter on their cycle of what a team looks like in minor versus anywhere else. And one thing that was very interesting was Central Michigan, to me, they got Gibbs for almost 120, but they had the rebate on Bijan, and I thought it was very weird that they didn't just spend the extra, $10 then to get potentially $10 off the net price of what that player, like getting a Bijan versus a Gibbs. I thought that was very weird. Early part of the auction was the way to get some deals. I think players like, Jacob with the Hawaii has continued pushing his team for that hard rebuild that he did last year, adding some more pieces. He's finally got a quarterback that he'll redshirt and he'll be bad again this year, but
yeah, I mean, I like what he did this year better than what he did last year. I think his haul, you and I talked about it because I was like, I can't remember. I was like panicking before like the Big 12 auction at like the first, I don't know, like 8 hours was just a shit show. I was like, I can't even partake in this. Like, it's giving me anxiety, because they were just all over the place. And I told Brian, I was like, please remind me what Hawaii did, because he either waited too long last year or went too early, like premature, and it ended up costing him. And it was ultimately that he waited too long last year, so he didn't have. This was a team that did a similar strategy last year to what
what you did,
to what I did, what A&M did, what Virginia did, but not as much. Again, not that level of firepower. It was like maybe he let 2 or 3 guys go. It had way more money than everybody else, and then the haul back it just wasn't there. And so this class with Anthony Richardson, Flowers, Hyatt, even Tyler Scott, and Dontavian Wicks. Green Bay is really good at one thing, and it's drafting wide receivers, and they drafted a handful of them now that Aaron Rodgers left. So I think that's kind of a sneaky stash there in Wicks. And it's like you see the guys that he threw out there at running back, Deneric Prince and Chris Rodriguez. It's just kind of like random dart throws at running back, with the majority of the focus being at the wide receiver position. And so I think he did, last year did not fare well. He didn't get a quarterback. That meant he was in the same boat again this year, if not worse. And so he got Anthony Richardson. I think that kind of now he has like there should be a clear vision there for Jacob if he was struggling. Now he at least has enough pieces that he can kind of go in the right direction. I think maybe next year one more rebuilding year, and then he should have where he brings in his running back or two to kind of round off this team of Richardson, Flowers, Burks, maybe Hyatt or Sky Moore, one of those two guys, with Jameis Williams and like a Tyquan Thornton or something like that. So which is pretty good for Minor.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So that's kind of, we've hit every conference. I don't know if there's anything else pressing. We'll definitely make sure people can see this. Take a look. This is not like how we feel on your class. These scores. This is kind of a soft math at figuring it out. You can compare it to other years, 2022, which I think most classes outperformed last year's by a pretty good margin.
Take that shit off of there. I don't want to see 2022 rankings.
Okay, you can just filter it out. Fucking curmudgeon.
Not as good on this sheet as you could the first one.
Yeah, you're right. I wish it worked better. So the next thing that happens in the league is scheduling. And so people who are unfamiliar with things, there is a form that you will fill out, and you get to schedule up to, if you're in a major conference, you get to schedule up to 6 teams for non-conference, 2 cross-conference. If you're in minor, you get to schedule up to 4 teams. This is important because it can really dictate the trajectory of what your team does, either getting a bowl game, being potentially really good in the national rankings. And so it's definitely worth thinking just a little bit on what your team looks like, where you kind of feel like you sit, and who you want to play. So there'll be a form. You can start doing this now. Some people have already started. But on that form, there's a second page that details kind of some of the projections that we like to call the Martin metric, because Matt Martin, who is Charlotte, helped pull this information off of MFL. And you're able to kind of see what people's teams' projected scores per week for the season are as of right now, and kind of how that stacks up for an all-play score. So it'll adjust as schedules are being done, and you can see what your projected all-play is with things. But currently, teams like Air Force, Georgia, Ole Miss, myself, even Daniel, are projected to be really tough outs for this coming season.
Where's this link at?
I haven't linked it anywhere.
Oh, cool.
Daniel's always good.
Yeah, but then there's obviously teams that are bad for Texas A&M, Toledo, Hawaii, Cal, Baylor, Ohio are all not supposed to do well this year. And so it's important to know that, so you know who you're scheduling, so you know if I'm going to be getting an easy win, or if I need to put a tougher opponent on my schedule to give my resume a boost. Those are all important considerations to think about now. To secure a spot, you have to, both you and your opponent have to fill out the same form. It's just a reverse thing. You only have to do it once, and then it'll automatically update the schedule sheet on the first tab. So I don't know if you guys want to speak to how important that is to make sure you're considering things like that.
Yeah, it's really important. It's the only reason why I think I ended up number 2 with the money.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah.
It's because I actually put some thought into my scheduling. I didn't win my conference, and I still made it to the playoffs. So try to put some thought into it. Even if you're a top team or if you're a middle team, play some bad teams, to improve your wins. But like, if you just need to look and see if you can play some good teams too. I think it's very important to take that consideration.
Whoops, go ahead.
I was going to say some other notable strategies that have been done on this is people really make a point to try to schedule the right cross-conference opponent if you're in a major one. That way you can either get easy conference wins, which are super important to securing the division, or or the like. And also, some teams have gotten really lucky where they were really bad. They scheduled kind of soft, and then they ended up with the bowl game and some player awards and stuff like that helped them into the next season. So there's definitely some things to consider and how you use this to either your benefit or detriment.
And even like for the really bad teams that Brian listed, A&M, Cal, Ohio, myself, Baylor. I would assume Charlotte, although Charlotte has better pieces than kind of some of these other teams. When you go about your scheduling, you're looking to schedule teams that are in that same tier as you. You do get $1 per win. Again, I think teams like that aren't expecting to get wins. They're not expecting to win, but if you can, the major teams get what, 6? How many 6 games to schedule?
Yeah, everyone gets 4 non-conference, and then the Power 5 conferences get to schedule their 2 cross-conference games, weeks 5 and 6.
So if you can get 4 games against teams that maybe you have a better chance of getting a win for, again, yeah, it's $1 per win, but how many instances where it was like guys, especially with jumping back and forth in minor, where it's like, oh, sorry fucker, like I'm gonna bump this guy and I win him at 26, and somebody like only had $25 and that was their high bid. So as dumb and little as it may seem, that little $1 for a win can really make a difference. So I think that's something that teams, especially the bad ones, should look into, because again, like prior to the upperclassman transfer, I think Baylor actually had the least amount of money in the conference.
There was a team in your conference. Yes, I think you had the least amount of money, and then there are other teams that had that. So there's really, if you're going to be a bad team, either you need to ask money. You can ask up to $5 from a team to play you if they really want. So if you have an easy conference win, for example, and I'm a bad team, I might make my price tag $5 from that conference team. Like, how much do they really want that win to secure conference, an extra conference win and really no cost, especially if they have like bye weeks. Bye weeks are super things too important. Like if I have a quarterback on a bye week 5 like Justin Herbert does, and he's my only quarterback, and I have the ability to pay someone to play them when they are a bad team, like maybe that's worth it. There's some things that should just be considered that don't really get thought of, and you have the ability to kind of control that and work through that and either negotiate or figure out what makes sense. But if you're a bad team and no one's giving you the incentive to play them, then you should just really, like Lewis said, play the other teams. Give each other a chance at either more money, or some of you might eventually make a bowl game, and that's just something prideful to play for. Yeah, things to consider, thoughts to have. I know a bunch of people have already started to soft commit to games. Just note that nothing is final until it's in this sheet. It has to be in there, has to be confirmed. Till it's confirmed, it is not actually scheduled. Don't care what you say, what kind of DMs you post to me. You got to get it in there. I will probably set this live once I get back. I'm going to be on vacation next week and out and not really available, so I'll set that to be live after, that way in case any issues come up, we can manage that correctly. Yep, sad horn. All right, that's where we sit. I hope everyone enjoyed the auction. I had a blast. I think it's always such fun to have. I hope people can continue to talk about things. We're going to, after the scheduling kind of gets done, we're going to hit a really lull over the summer until things kind of pick up a little bit right before the season starts with kind of the close of the auction. People can still bid and acquire players from now until through to August. I will change the timer to 24 hours instead of 12. That way, if someone gets nominated, they're not just out the door quickly. It'll be fixed. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I will get this started and processed and put the video up for everyone to review later.
Sweet.
Brian.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.